So I'm here in section 5 on the bottom page 2. Aristotle says, "Let us, however, resume our discussion from the point at which we digressed." And that discussion, and the main point of it, or the main thrust of it, is asking, what is happiness? To judge from the lives that men lead, most men, and men of the most vulgar type, seem, not without some ground, to identify the good, or happiness, with pleasure. So it's one sort of answer to the question, what is happiness? Well, pleasure is happiness. Pleasure is the good, which is the reason why they love the life of enjoyment. For there are, we may say, three prominent types of life. That just mentioned, which is the life devoted to pleasure. The political, which would be the life devoted to fame and honor and achievement. And thirdly, the contemplative life, which would be the life devoted to learning and knowledge. Now, the mass of mankind are evidently quite slavish in their tastes, preferring a life suitable to beasts. You can see what an elitist, he's an aristocrat, or he thinks in a very sort of aristocratic way, Aristotle. But they get some ground for their view from the fact that many of those in high places share the tastes of Sardanapalus. Sardanapalus was a infamous Greek tyrant who devoted himself totally to pleasures. So most people who are in high places, people with social status and money, devote themselves to pleasure, Aristotle says. A consideration of the prominent types of life show that people of superior refinement, it's not the vulgar, and of active disposition identify happiness with honor. For this is, roughly speaking, the end of political life. That is, there are some people who devote themselves to pleasures, but there are some people who devote themselves to honors, and he identifies that with the political life. You sort of imagine Greek culture, especially a democracy like Athens, where, at least to people, to some extent, the government was wide open. It wasn't a kingship. It wasn't a rule of the few, although that happens sometimes. But especially in a democracy, you can become involved in politics and you can achieve, like you can in our society. If you run for office, if you do anything which is devoted towards gaining prominence in society, fame, honor, admiration, then in a certain sense you're living the political life where your goal, your main goal is not pleasure and enjoyment, but your main goal is fame and achievement. That's the second type of life, the second type of good. He continues by saying, but it seems too superficial to be what we are looking for, since it is thought to depend on those who bestow honor rather than on him who receives it. That is, at the end of the day, let me make this a little bigger. At the end of the day, the good of honor depends upon people honoring you. So he says, but the good we divine to be something proper to a man and not easily taken from him. That is, Aristotle says, well, if the life of honor, the political life, depends upon other people honoring you, admiring you, it doesn't really seem right. That is, whatever the good is proper to a human being, it should depend upon the human being him or herself. Further, men seem to pursue honor in order that they may be assured of their goodness. At least it is by men of practical wisdom that they seek to be honored, and among those who know them, and on the ground of their virtue. Clearly then, according to them, at any rate, virtue is better. So he's getting into some other things there. So he's introduced three types of life, three sort of typical types of living your life, ways of living your life that reflect different notions of what we consider to be the summum bonum, the greatest good. Pleasure, honor, and then he's mentioned the contemplative life, the life of the pursuit of understanding, the pursuit of truth. And So he's left that out there, that if we're going to answer the question, what is happiness, we're really asking, again, what is human happiness? What is it that a human being should be pursuing in order to be truly happy, one might say? And here we're going to necessarily have to get into a discussion of, well, are there different levels of happiness? Are there more and less superficial or deep and authentic forms of happiness? I think the picture that Aristotle will be sketching out is the idea that, well, pleasures, physical pleasures, trivial pleasures, they do make us happy, but they make us happy in a more superficial way than other sort of things. And that you can live your life and be superficially happy, and then you can live your life and be profoundly happy, and that there's a big difference. It will be sort of going in that direction. So let's skip ahead. There's a discussion here, maybe I'll return to it, to the question of whether there is one thing called the good that all good things share, which would be Plato's theory, which he rejects. So he says, let us again return to the good we are seeking and ask what it can be. And again, he's thinking about what is the greatest good for a human life. And that is the same as asking, what is it that would make a human being truly happy? He says it seems different in different actions and arts, and it is different in medicine and strategy and in the other arts likewise. What then is the good of each? Surely that for whose sake everything else is done. So that's the idea of the greatest good. That for whose sake everything else is done, the ultimate goal. And again, he identifies that with happiness. Now, such a thing, happiness above all else, is held to be. For this we choose always for itself and never for the sake of something else. But honor, pleasure, reason, and every virtue we choose indeed for themselves. But we choose them also for the sake of happiness. And this introduces an idea that has to be developed, and that is that the life of virtue, if we, and here we obviously can make connections with the Meno, the life of virtue is the only really happy life. That's not quite absolutely the whole story, but it's a very important part of it. And it's a big challenge because basically it suggests the idea that in order for a human being to be really happy, they have to be good. That is, happiness is not just a matter of pleasing yourself. Real human happiness is a matter of virtue. It's a matter of being a good person, to put it in different terms. So, but what is this? I mean, that is, well, he will ask, what is virtue? I mean, he has to ask that question. But to go back to the question of these three different types of life, he has suggested this. Well, if we ask the question, what is human happiness? What is the greatest good? That is, the thing that a whole life should aim for. We've got three different answers: pleasure, honor, and knowledge. What he calls contemplation. And that's basically the life of the hedonist, the political life, and the life of the philosopher. That is, the hedonist pursues pleasure, the politician pursues honor, and the philosopher pursues knowledge. Which of these, is there anything to choose from? I mean, people choose these lives for themselves. Is there anything to be said that one of them is better than the others? He's already suggested that to live a life pursuing pleasure is vulgar, but he just said that. He's already said that choosing the political life in pursuit of honor, you're depending too much on other people. And he is going for this life ultimately as the greatest, the life that contains the greatest good, I think, and the true amount of happiness. But how does he justify that? I mean, really, how do you choose between these three different lives? Because, I mean, we all can relate to them. Maybe we choose one or another, but we can all relate to them in the sense we can see why somebody would want that. Most of us have fantasized about being fabulously rich and all the things we would do with our money, and how great that would be. Most of us have fantasized about being famous and admired and how great that would be. And some of us, and I think most of us too, have thought that truth and understanding, whether it's scientific understanding, philosophical understanding, historical understanding, I mean, to really know how the universe works, the goal of physics, the physical universe, to really know human history and the origins of human beings, that if that's the kind of thing that really excites you and you think would be worth devoting your life to, then you have a philosophical disposition, let's say. If you think that the life of pleasure is the way to go, then you have a hedonistic disposition. If you think the life of honor is the way to go, you have a political disposition. So the question that we're thinking about here, and I think the question that Aristotle was getting to in a roundabout way, is how do we decide between those things? And he does have a method. That is, if you look at the text and you sort of piece things together, he does have a method, a way that he thinks you can choose between them, or there is a basis for it. And I'll tell you that it depends upon a theory of human nature. And we'll look and try to find that in the text in the next video.